Entitled sister-in-law is calling me a creep, all because I raised her kid and he now likes me more than her. I was 18 when I became a single father to a kid who wasn't mine. My girlfriend Jane and I had just graduated high school when her older sister Lisa came to us sobbing about fertility struggles. She'd spent 3 years trying to conceive and was desperate. She begged us to surrogate since we were young and healthy. I was reluctant, but eventually agreed because Jane seemed okay with it, and I loved her and wanted to support her family. Everything went smoothly at first, until Jane was 8 months pregnant with Lisa's baby. That's when Lisa showed up at our apartment and announced she'd gotten a promotion that required moving to Europe. She said she couldn't handle the baby with this job opportunity and wanted us to keep it since we'd grown attached anyway. Jane completely lost it. She started screaming at Lisa about how this wasn't the plan and how she wasn't ready to be a mother at 18. But Lisa didn't care. She just up and left the country. Jane gave birth a month later and we took the baby home. My parents were never in the picture, and Jane's parents claimed they were too exhausted to help, and so all the work was left to us. Needless to say, it was an absolute nightmare. We had had travel plans, job opportunities, all things we're giving up to raise this little boy. At least I thought we were giving these up. It became clear very quickly that Jane couldn't handle the baby. She yelled at him a lot and over time started making these jokes about disappearing like her sister. Well, these jokes turned out to be true. One morning I woke up to feed little Thomas and found a note on the kitchen counter. Jane wrote that she needed to find herself and couldn't do this anymore. She was gone. I tried to call her, but she had already deactivated her number. And so, for the next 10 years, I gave Thomas all I had. I didn't go to college. I began working 2 jobs and spent every ounce of my free time being the best dad I could. My own dad was never around, and I didn't want to repeat his mistakes. It wasn't much, but Thomas loved it. Fast forward 10 years, Thomas called me dad without thinking twice. He knew his history, but it didn't matter to him. As far as he was concerned, I was dad. Well, that's when Lisa showed up at Thomas's school during pickup. First time in 10 years. She was wearing designer clothes and driving a Mercedes. Apparently, she'd married some tech executive and decided she wanted to play mommy now that the hard part was over. I remember Thomas hid behind my leg when she tried to walk over to him. He whispered, "Dad, who is that lady?" And my heart broke. Lisa's face turned red, and she started making a scene right there in the parking lot. "I'm your mother," she kept saying while Thomas pressed his face into my jeans. Other parents were starting to stare. I picked Thomas up and carried him to our car, while Lisa followed us screaming about her rights. That night, she blew up my phone with texts demanding to see her son. I reminded her about the legal documents she'd signed giving up her parental rights. She said her new husband's lawyer would overturn those papers. The next week, she started showing up everywhere, at the grocery store, at the park during baseball practice. She'd take photos from a distance and post them on Facebook with captions like, "Watching my baby boy from afar because his kidnapper won't let me near him." Then she escalated. She started telling other parents at school that something was off about a young single man being so obsessed with raising someone else's child. She'd corner moms at pickup and whisper about how it wasn't natural for a man to want to raise a boy alone. One day, I was helping Thomas with his homework at the kitchen table when there was a knock at the door. 2 CPS workers stood there with stern expressions. They said they'd received a report about inappropriate conduct with a minor in the home. My hands started shaking as they explained that someone had accused me of being a predator. They needed to interview Thomas separately and inspect our home immediately. Thomas must have sensed my panic because he started crying and wrapped his arms around my waist, begging them not to take him away. The next 3 hours were hell. They interviewed Thomas in his bedroom while I sat in the living room with another worker going through our daily routines. They inspected everything from our sleeping arrangements to the photos on the walls. Thomas kept crying for me, and I could hear him through the door saying, "I want my dad," over and over. Finally, they emerged and said Thomas had been very clear that I was his father, and he felt safe and loved. They found no more evidence of any inappropriate behavior. The worker actually apologized and said it was clear this was a malicious false report. I knew exactly who had made that call. The next day, I filed for a restraining order against Lisa and started documenting everything. But little did I know, I was late. Lisa had already started spreading rumors. Full story linked below.